Officer Davenport, we need to talk.
Whoa. What's going on?
You know exactly what's going on. Evidence room logs. Your access card. 14 times in 2 months.
No. I was just...
Turn around.
The confrontation in that hallway would later be described by prosecutors as the moment a decorated police officer's double life came crashing down. For 2 years, Darnell Kendrick had been living 2 lives. By day, he was a Providence police officer with a clean file, a good reputation, and a badge that gave him access to one of the most sensitive rooms in the department. By night, he was a drug dealer, quietly, methodically stealing seized narcotics from the evidence room and selling them back onto the same streets he was supposed to protect. Fentanyl, oxycodone, cocaine. He moved it all, and he thought he had built the perfect system. He knew which evidence was scheduled for destruction. He knew how to manipulate the access logs. He knew which surveillance cameras had blind spots. He had studied the weaknesses in the system the same way he had once studied for his academy exams, carefully, patiently, thoroughly. What he didn't know was that one of his buyers would overdose in a gas station bathroom on a Tuesday afternoon, and that the fentanyl found in that man's system would be traced, chemically, precisely, back to a drug bust that Darnell Kendrick himself had processed 19 days earlier. That one death would unravel everything. By the time investigators were done, they had documented 43 instances of evidence tampering, over $380,000 worth of narcotics stolen and resold, and a network of street-level dealers who had been buying directly from a man with a badge. Before we continue, how many years do you think a cop should serve for dealing drugs out of the evidence room? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you believe in holding law enforcement accountable, subscribe. We cover cases like this every week. Darnell Marcus Kendrick was born in 1987 in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. His father worked as a machinist at a jewelry factory. His mother ran the front desk at a medical clinic. They lived in a 2-bedroom apartment on Prospect Street. Not poor, but not comfortable either. The kind of household where a broken washing machine meant 3 weeks of trips to the laundromat. After graduating from Tolman High School in 2005, Darnell enrolled at the Community College of Rhode Island, studying criminal justice. He told his parents he wanted to be a cop. It wasn't just a career goal. It felt like a calling. In 2010, at 23 years old, he was accepted into the Providence Police Academy. He graduated in the top third of his class. His instructors described him as detail-oriented, patient, and sharp, someone with a natural instinct for investigative procedure. That same patience, that same attention to detail, he would later use it to steal nearly $400,000 worth of drugs without anyone noticing for 2 years. His first assignment was patrol in the Olneyville neighborhood, one of the toughest beats in the city. High crime, open-air drug markets, the kind of place where a young officer either hardens fast or burns out completely. Darnell didn't burn out. He made arrests. He built relationships with informants. He learned how the drug trade operated from the ground up, the players, the patterns, the pressure points. By 2014, his supervisors promoted him to the narcotics unit. They thought they were rewarding him. In reality, they were handing him the keys. To understand how Darnell Kendrick stole nearly $400,000 worth of drugs, you have to understand how police evidence rooms actually work. When narcotics are seized, they're logged into evidence: case number, description, chain of custody. Officers sign in and out. Everything is supposed to be tracked. On paper, it sounds airtight. But evidence rooms aren't banks. They're locked rooms in basements, managed by civilian clerks processing hundreds of items every single week. And there's one critical detail that Darnell zeroed in on. Once a case is closed, the seized drugs are scheduled for destruction. They're supposed to be incinerated. But the gap between scheduled and destroyed can stretch weeks, sometimes months. That gap was his window. He figured out which cases were closed, which narcotics were sitting in the destruction queue, how to time his visits during shift changes, when clerks were distracted and attention was split. And then he discovered something that made everything easier. The surveillance cameras in the evidence room had been broken for over a year. Maintenance requests had been filed. Nothing had been done. Nobody was watching. Over the course of 11 weeks, Darnell Kendrick walked into that evidence room 27 times. Each time, he walked out with seized narcotics in his pocket. No alarms, no flags, no questions. No one noticed. until Marcus Delgado collapsed in a bathroom stall with Darnell's product in his bloodstream. The first theft happened on September 3rd, 2022. Darnell signed into the evidence room at 6:47 p.m., timing his entry during the shift change between the day clerk and the night clerk, the exact window when oversight was thinnest. He logged himself as retrieving evidence for a case review. The case he pulled was a fentanyl bust from 7 months earlier. 4 defendants, all had already pleaded guilty. The evidence was 2 weeks away from scheduled destruction. He removed 14 grams of fentanyl from the evidence bag, resealed it, logged out at 6:52 p.m. 5 minutes. That's all it took. By the following weekend, those drugs were on the street. Darnell's distribution network wasn't elaborate. He didn't run a crew or control territory. He didn't need to. After years working narcotics, he already had the contacts. Low-level dealers he had arrested, informants he had cultivated, people who knew him as a cop and, because of that, assumed he had access to reliable product. He charged slightly below market rate. Not so low it raised suspicion, just low enough that buyers kept coming back. His first customer was a man named Terrence Bowl, a small-time dealer from the West End that Darnell had arrested twice but never formally charged. They had an understanding. Terrence didn't ask where the product came from. Darnell didn't ask where it went. Over the next 11 weeks, Darnell made 26 more trips to the evidence room. He moved fentanyl, oxycodone, cocaine, and MDMA. He sold to at least 7 different buyers. He deposited the cash in amounts under $2,000, spread across 3 different bank accounts, always at different branches, always in person, deliberately staying below the threshold that triggers federal reporting requirements. Investigators would later estimate he moved over $380,000 worth of narcotics during that period. And for 11 weeks, not a single person inside the Providence Police Department suspected a thing. In hindsight, the warning signs were everywhere. Darnell's evidence room access was unusually high for someone in his position. Most narcotics detectives signed in maybe twice a month. Darnell was signing in twice a week. His access pattern was consistent. He always pulled evidence from closed cases, always right before scheduled destruction dates. No other officer showed anything close to the same pattern. And then there were the lifestyle changes. In April 2022, Darnell bought a new Dodge Charger. Cash. In July, he put a down payment on a condo in Cranston. In October, he flew his girlfriend to Miami for a long weekend at a luxury hotel. His base salary was $67,000 a year. Nobody asked questions. His sergeant assumed he had family money. His colleagues figured he was living beyond his means, not unusual in the department. Internal affairs had no reason to look at him. His file was spotless. The system that was supposed to catch dirty cops had failed completely. It would take a death to change that. Marcus Delgado was 34 years old. He grew up in South Providence, dropped out of Central High School at 16, and spent years bouncing between jobs: construction, warehouse work, landscaping in the summers. Nothing that stuck. His addiction started with prescription painkillers after a car accident in 2018. Within a year, he had moved to heroin. Within 2, fentanyl. He had been through treatment 3 times. His mother had stopped speaking to him after he pawned her television. His younger sister, Gabriella, still believed he could get clean. She was planning to visit him the following week. On Tuesday, November 14, 2023, Marcus Delgado bought a small quantity of fentanyl from Terrence Bowl. He used it in the bathroom of a Sunoco station on Broad Street at approximately 2:15 in the afternoon. At 2:23, a customer found him unresponsive in the stall. Paramedics arrived at 2:31. They administered 3 doses of Narcan. It wasn't enough. Marcus Delgado was pronounced dead at Rhode Island Hospital at 3:07 p.m. He left behind a mother who hadn't spoken to him in 2 years, a sister who had been planning to visit him the following week, and a small baggie of fentanyl that would unravel a police officer's entire operation. In most overdose cases, the investigation ends with the death certificate. Resources are limited. Fentanyl deaths are common. Prosecutors can't chase every dealer connected to every overdose. But Marcus Delgado's case was different, because his sister wouldn't let it go. 3 days after his death, Gabriella Delgado walked into the Providence Police Department and demanded to speak with a detective. She wanted to know who sold her brother the drugs that killed him. The case was assigned to Detective Meredith Santana, a 15-year veteran of the narcotics unit. Detective Santana ran the fentanyl recovered from the scene through the DEA's drug signature database. Every batch of fentanyl carries a chemical fingerprint, trace compounds, cutting agents, specific ratios that can identify exactly where the product originated. The results came back in 6 days. The fentanyl that killed Marcus Delgado matched a batch seized in a raid on Messer Street 8 months earlier. 4 defendants, all had pleaded guilty. The case was closed. The evidence was supposed to have been destroyed. Detective Santana pulled the evidence logs. The Messer Street fentanyl had been signed out for a case review on October 26, 2023, 19 days before Marcus Delgado's death. The officer who signed it out, Darnell Kendrick. Detective Santana didn't confront Darnell immediately. She knew that would only give him time to cover his tracks. Instead, she pulled every evidence log bearing his signature from the previous 2 years. What she found was damning. 27 evidence room entries in 11 weeks, all for closed cases, all for narcotics scheduled for destruction, a pattern so clear, so consistent, that she couldn't believe no one had caught it sooner. She brought her findings to Lieutenant Frank Camacho, head of internal affairs. Lieutenant Camacho ordered a full audit of the evidence room. Civilian clerks were removed from the process. State police were brought in to ensure independence. Every item Darnell had signed out was checked against what was physically in storage. The audit took 9 days. When it was finished, investigators had identified 43 instances where evidence had been tampered with or removed entirely. Fentanyl, oxycodone, cocaine, MDMA. Estimated street value, $383,000. On December 8, 2023, Lieutenant Camacho walked down the hallway toward the narcotics unit with 2 state police officers behind him. Darnell Kendrick was sitting at his desk, reviewing case files. He looked up. He saw the internal affairs badge. He saw the state troopers. And he knew it was over. The body cam footage from that hallway would later be played at trial. "Officer Kendrick, we need to talk." Darnell's hand came up instinctively. "Whoa, what's going on?" "Evidence room, your access card. 27 entries in 11 weeks. You want to explain that?" For a moment, Darnell tried to hold his composure. "I was logging seized property. That's part of my job." Lieutenant Camacho stepped closer. "Logging it or taking it home?" Darnell's back was against the wall, literally. "I don't know what you're trying to say." "I'm saying Marcus Delgado is dead. Fentanyl overdose. And the batch that killed him traces back to evidence you signed out 3 weeks ago." The footage shows Darnell's expression collapse. His shoulders drop. His eyes go to the floor. "I want a lawyer." Those were the last words he spoke to his colleagues. With Darnell in custody, investigators turned to his finances. They subpoenaed records from 3 banks. What they found was a detailed roadmap of his operation. Between September 2022 and November 2023, he had deposited $147,000 in cash, never more than $2,000 at a time, always in different branches, always in person. He had paid cash for a $38,000 Dodge Charger. He had put $45,000 down on a condo. He had taken 4 vacations totaling over $18,000 in expenses. His declared income for the same period, $71,400. The math didn't add up. It wasn't even close. Investigators also tracked down his distribution network. Terrence Bull was arrested on December 12th, 4 days after Darnell. Faced with federal drug trafficking charges, he cooperated immediately. He told investigators everything: how long it had been going on, the prices, the meeting locations. He handed over text messages that corroborated every single transaction. "I knew he was a cop," Terrence said in his recorded statement. "That's why I trusted him. I figured if a cop was selling it, it had to be clean." The irony was brutal. The drugs Terrence bought from a police officer were the same drugs police had seized from other dealers. The same drugs that were supposed to have been destroyed. The same drugs that killed Marcus Delgado. 5 other buyers were identified. 3 cooperated. 2 fled the state and were later apprehended. All of them confirmed the same thing. They had been buying narcotics from a Providence police officer for months, sometimes years. The most damaging evidence came from Darnell's personal phone. He had used a separate device for his drug business, a prepaid Samsung purchased at a Walmart in Warwick. He thought it was untraceable. He was wrong. Investigators recovered it from his condo during the search. The messages left no room for doubt. Terrence, October 14th, 2023. You good for this weekend? Yeah, same spot. Got something stronger this time. How strong? Lab tested. This is the real deal. Where are you getting this stuff, man? Don't worry about it. Just know it's clean. Lab tested. The real deal. Clean. He was describing drugs he had stolen from the evidence room. Narcotics seized from the street, tested by crime labs, and logged as evidence. He was using police infrastructure to guarantee the quality of the product he was selling illegally. And the messages revealed something else. Darnell knew exactly how dangerous the fentanyl was. In one exchange from September 2023, he warned a buyer to cut it heavy because the product was too hot to use straight. He knew. He sold it anyway. And Marcus Delgado paid with his life. Darnell Kendrick was indicted by a federal grand jury on January 19, 2024, on 11 counts: theft from a law enforcement evidence facility, distribution of controlled substances, conspiracy, money laundering, and the charge that carried the most weight: distribution of a controlled substance resulting in death. That charge alone carried a mandatory minimum of 20 years. His attorney filed motions to suppress the text messages. Denied. Judge Raymond Foster ruled the evidence was legally obtained. The trial began June 3, 2024. Prosecutors called 14 witnesses over 5 days. Detective Santana testified about the investigation and the evidence logs. Terrence Bowl testified about buying from Darnell for over a year, the locations, the prices, the messages. A DEA chemist testified that the fentanyl found in Marcus Delgado's system was a 94.7% chemical match to the Messer Street batch, the same batch Darnell signed out 19 days before Marcus died. And then Gabriela Delgado took the stand. He wasn't just some addict, she told the jury. He was my brother. He was trying to get clean, and this police officer sold him the poison that killed him. She looked directly at Darnell. How do you sleep at night? Darnell stared at the table. On June 11, 2024, after 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. Guilty. On all 11 counts. Sentencing came September 6th. Prosecutors asked for 22 years. The defense asked for the minimum. Judge Foster looked at Darnell Kendrick and delivered his ruling. Mr. Kendrick, you took an oath to protect and serve. You were given access to a system built on trust. And you exploited that access to enrich yourself and poison your own community. The drugs you stole were seized to keep them off the streets. You put them back. And one of those people is dead because of your greed. Darnell Kendrick was sentenced to 204 months in federal prison, 17 years. He will be eligible for release in 2041 at 54 years old. He was designated to FCI Fort Dix in New Jersey. Like most former law enforcement inmates, he was immediately placed in protective custody. Cops don't do well in general population. His mother visits monthly. His girlfriend stopped coming after the 3rd visit. His colleagues don't speak his name. His badge was confiscated. His pension forfeited. His name removed from the department's commendation wall. Darnell Kendrick doesn't exist to the Providence Police Department anymore. He's just case number 2024-CR-0147. The Kendrick case exposed failures that went far beyond one corrupt officer. The evidence room cameras had been broken for 14 months. Maintenance requests had been filed and ignored. Evidence logs were reviewed manually, once a quarter. No automated system existed to flag unusual access patterns. And the destruction backlog for seized narcotics had grown to over 18 months. Drugs sitting in storage, waiting to be incinerated, while officers with access cards walked in and out unchecked. Within 60 days of sentencing, the Providence Police Department announced sweeping reforms. New surveillance systems were installed. Access logs were automated with alerts triggered by unusual patterns. The destruction backlog was cleared. External audits were scheduled quarterly. Lieutenant Camacho, who had led the internal affairs investigation, was promoted to captain and placed in charge of a new evidence integrity unit. What happened here was a systemic failure, Captain Camacho said at a press conference. One officer exploited weaknesses that should never have existed. We are committed to ensuring it never happens again. Gabriela Delgado attended every single day of the trial. She listened to her brother described as a statistic, an overdose victim, a casualty of the opioid crisis. After the sentencing, she spoke to reporters outside the courthouse. My brother made mistakes. He struggled with addiction. He wasn't perfect. But he didn't deserve to die because a cop wanted to make money. He didn't deserve to be poisoned by someone who swore an oath to protect him. She paused. 17 years isn't enough. It will never be enough. But at least he's off the street. At least he can't hurt anyone else. Gabriela has since become an advocate for overdose victims' families. She speaks at community events and works with a nonprofit supporting those who have lost loved ones to fentanyl. She keeps a photo of Marcus on her phone, one from before the addiction, when he was smiling. "That's who I remember," she says. "That's who he was supposed to be." The Providence Police Department has not publicly acknowledged how many other cases may have been compromised by Darnell Kendrick's thefts. Defense attorneys across Rhode Island have filed motions to review convictions in cases where he handled evidence. At least 12 cases are under active review. 3 convictions have already been overturned. The ripple effects of one officer's betrayal will be felt for years. And on a memorial wall at a recovery center in South Providence, a new plaque now reads, Marcus Anthony Delgado, 1989 to 2023. Beloved brother, may you finally find peace. His sister paid for it herself.